The first time I sensed danger was the night my mother hugged me too long. We stood in our tiny Baltimore kitchen under a flickering bulb that never fully stayed bright. Her arms wrapped around me tightly, almost desperately, and her body shook as if she were cold. My mother was not the soft type. Since my father died 5 years earlier, she had become hard, sharp with words, always tired, always worried. Love in our house showed up as sacrifice, not affection. I was 17 and already used to hunger, eviction threats taped to our door, and pretending everything was fine at school. So when she whispered that I was her good daughter, fear settled deep into my stomach. The words did not feel like praise. They felt like goodbye. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. My mother pulled away from me quickly and wiped her face. The man who entered was Mr. Raymond, her so-called friend. He always looked expensive gray suits, polished shoes, a quiet confidence that filled the room. Since he began visiting months earlier, groceries had appeared in our kitchen, and once in a while, I noticed folded cash in my mother's drawer. They sat at the small dining table and spoke in low voices, while I stayed in my bedroom with the door half shut. The walls were thin. I heard pieces of their conversation drifting through. "She's 17 now. She's beautiful. You promised this would save us. You'll keep your word." Each sentence made my chest tighter. I had no idea what they were talking about, but I knew my name was somewhere inside those whispers. My mother soon called me out to greet him. I walked slowly into the living room. Mr. Raymond's eyes moved over me in a way that made my skin crawl, like I was something on display. He smiled slightly and said I had grown. My mother smiled too quickly and said I was smart and obedient. Then he opened his briefcase and brought out a thick envelope. Without a word, he slid it across the table toward her. Her hands shook as she touched it. The room felt heavy. When I asked what the money was for, my mother's face tightened, and she ordered me back to my room sharply. That night, I heard the front door close long after midnight. When I peeked into the living room, the envelope was gone. My mother sat on the couch alone in the dark, crying without sound. The next morning, she told me to pack my things, not for a vacation, not to move with her, just to leave. She said I was going to stay with Mr. Raymond for a while, that he would take care of me, that my life would be better. My heart dropped so suddenly it felt like I stopped breathing. I asked if she was sending me away for money. Her face drained of color. Instead of answering, she slapped me hard across the face. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest was worse. I asked again if she had sold me. She turned her back to me and said, "Hunger makes people do terrible things." That was the closest she came to admitting the truth. By evening, his black SUV waited outside our apartment building. My small bag sat by the door with all my clothes inside it. My mother stood beside it, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. She said it was temporary. She said she would visit, but she would not look at me. I stood there, staring at the woman who gave birth to me, the woman who had raised me, and tried to understand how a mother could trade her child for survival. When I finally stepped into that vehicle, the door closed softly behind me. The driver pulled away from the curb. I watched my building disappear through the window, and with it, the last piece of the girl I used to be. Mr. Raymond's house stood in a quiet gated neighborhood outside the city, far from bus stops, far from anything familiar. Tall iron gates slid open silently as the SUV entered. Inside was a massive 2-story home with dark windows and trimmed hedges that looked too perfect to be real. The driver carried my bag inside without speaking. Mr. Raymond led me through wide hallways that smelled of wood polish and money. He showed me a bedroom at the far end of the house. The windows were small. The door had a lock on the outside. "This is your room," he said calmly. "You will stay here. You will obey the rules. If you do, everything will be fine." I asked when I would see my mother. He smiled in a way that made my stomach twist. "When I decide?" The first week passed in confusion and silence. I was not allowed a phone. I was not allowed outside. A woman named Teresa cooked and cleaned. She barely spoke, but when she did, her eyes were full of warning. I was given nice clothes, better food than I had ever eaten at home, and told to rest. The luxury felt fake, like a lie wrapped in silk. Every evening, Mr. Raymond would come into the living room and call me to sit across from him. He asked about my school, my friends, my dreams. all in a calm voice that made me uneasy. Each night after those talks, I cried alone in my room and prayed my mother would change her mind. On the 10th day, everything changed. That night, he came to my door with a glass of wine in one hand. He dismissed Teresa early. The house was silent. He unlocked my door slowly, stepped inside, and locked it behind him. I knew then. Fear rushed through my body like fire. He spoke about our agreement and how my mother was paid well. I told him I did not agree to anything. He laughed and said contracts do not need the consent of children. When he moved toward me, I tried to run. The door did not open from the inside. After that night, I stopped believing help would come. The house became a cage, and I became something owned. Days turned into long, empty routines. I cleaned, I ate, I waited. At night he came. I stopped screaming because no one listened. Teresa once whispered that she was sorry and that she was only staying because she needed money too. My body grew thin, my eyes grew hollow. Sometimes I would stare at the ceiling for hours, waiting for sleep to carry me far from that house. I tried once to escape through a bathroom window, but the alarm sounded before my foot touched the ground. Mr. Raymond beat me that night and reminded me how much I cost. He said I was an investment. 2 months later, I managed to steal a phone from his office. My hands shook as I dialed the only number I still remembered. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. I cried and begged her to come get me. I told her everything. There was a long silence on the line. Then she said, "Ava, I used the money to clear our debts. We have light again. We eat every day. I can't pay him back." I asked if that meant my life was the price. She did not answer. The call disconnected. That was the moment I understood. I was truly alone. From that day on, I stopped hoping for rescue. I only planned. I watched the guards. I counted the doors. I learned the schedule of the house. Teresa once slipped food under my door and whispered that the back gate alarm was faulty during heavy rainstorms. I did not know if I would ever get another chance, but I held on to that information like a secret weapon. And on a night when the rain fell louder than my heartbeat, I decided I would either escape that house or die trying. The rain started just after midnight, heavy and violent, slapping against the roof like warning drums. Thunder shook the walls, and for the first time since I entered that house, the power went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. From my room, I listened carefully. The guards always sheltered under the back shed during storms. Teresa had told me that weeks ago in a whisper that trembled with fear. My heart pounded as I slipped out of bed. My hands shook as I tested the handle. For once, my door was unlocked. I did not question why. I just moved, barefoot, silent, shaking. I stepped into the hallway and followed memory through darkness. I reached the back exit just as lightning lit up the yard. The rain soaked me instantly. The faulty alarm let out a short broken sound, then died. I didn't stop. I ran. My lungs burned. My feet cut on gravel and glass. I didn't know where I was going, only that I could not stay. Behind me, I heard shouting. A flashlight beam sliced through the rain. I pushed harder, faster, fear carrying me farther than strength ever could. I reached the street and kept running until my legs gave out beneath me. The world blurred. Rain, darkness. Sirens in the distance. Then headlights. A car stopped. A woman jumped out, screaming for someone to call 911. She wrapped her coat around my shaking body. I collapsed into her arms, crying, soaked in rain and terror. At the hospital, the police arrived. The doctors saw my injuries. They asked questions. For the first time, I told the truth out loud. Everything. The envelope, the deal, the locked room. The pain. My words came out broken, but they listened. When they asked who did this to me, I said his name. When they asked who sent me there, I said hers too. They arrested Mr. Raymond before sunrise. The raid was fast and violent. Guards on the ground, doors broken, Teresa crying in handcuffs even though she was only a worker. When the detective returned to my hospital room and told me he was in custody, I closed my eyes and breathed for the first time in months. But freedom was not complete yet. There was still one person the law needed to confront, my mother. They brought her in later that day. When I saw her through the glass, she looked small, weak. Nothing like the woman who once slapped me into silence. She cried when she saw me. She said she never thought he would hurt me. She said she only wanted us to survive. The detective laid the printed bank transfers on the table. Dates, amounts, proof. My mother's excuses died right there. She signed the statements with shaking hands. She was charged with human trafficking and child endangerment. As they led her away, she reached toward me through the glass. I did not reach back. That was the moment the last thin thread between us finally snapped. The next weeks passed in counseling rooms and court statements, nurses, social workers, detectives, lawyers. They wrapped me in questions and care at the same time. Mr. Raymond tried to deny everything, but evidence spoke louder than money. His house became a crime scene. My old room became proof. Teresa was released after testifying. And me, I was placed under protective services, moved to a safe location, given a new beginning that felt terrifying and unreal. But one thing was clear now. I was no longer owned. I was no longer locked. And for the first time since the check crossed my mother's table, my future belonged to me again. The first place they sent me after the hospital was a group home outside the city. It was quiet, clean, and filled with girls who carried the same silent damage in their eyes. I barely spoke for the first 2 weeks. I slept with the lights on. I flinched at every sudden sound. Nightmares came like clockwork. Some nights I woke up screaming. Other nights I woke up numb. Therapy became my routine. Talking hurt, but silence was killing me faster. Slowly, piece by piece, I learned how to breathe again. I learned that what happened to me had a name. I learned the word survivor. It felt strange to wear it, but I kept it anyway. The court case lasted months. I testified behind a screen so I wouldn't have to see his face. My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every sentence. The judge listened. The jury listened. And the evidence spoke even louder than I did. Mr. Raymond was sentenced to life in prison without parole. My mother pleaded guilty to trafficking her own child for financial gain. She received 20 years. When the gavel hit the bench for the final time, a sound like a door closing forever echoed through the courtroom. Some people say justice feels good. To me, it felt heavy. It felt final. It felt like a chapter had ended whether I was ready or not. I never went back to her apartment. The building was sold. Everything from my old life scattered in different directions. A couple from Maine fostered me at first. They were kind, patient. They knocked before entering my room. Every small act of respect felt like a miracle. I returned to school a year behind, but I didn't quit. I studied with the hunger of someone who had almost lost everything. Each grade I passed felt like I was stealing back a future that had been sold without my consent. Years passed. The nightmares became fewer. The scars remained, but they stopped controlling me. I went to college on a scholarship for survivors. I studied social work. People said it was strange that someone so broken wanted to help others. They were wrong. It was the only thing that made sense. By the time I graduated, I had spoken at shelters, testified at policy meetings, and helped rescue 3 girls from situations that mirrored my own. Every life pulled back from darkness, stitched a little more strength into my own. I visited my mother once in prison. Only once. She was older, smaller. Her hands shook as she held the phone through the glass. She cried and begged me to forgive her. I told her the truth. I forgive you so that I can heal, but forgiveness does not change consequences. She nodded through tears. When the time ended, I stood up and walked away without looking back. Some doors are not meant to be reopened. Some lessons only stick when they are permanent. Today, I live with purpose. I wake up knowing that my past did not destroy me, it shaped me. I am no longer the girl who was traded for survival. I am the woman who survived betrayal, silence, and captivity. I tell my story so other girls will recognize danger sooner than I did. I speak because my younger self was once forced into silence. And every time someone listens, another chain breaks. If this story touched you, shocked you, or gave you strength, please subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and life-changing stories like this. Your support keeps these stories alive.